we're doing today is your Kabbalistic questions, okay? We're handling all the esoteric wisdom of the thousands of years of Judaism.
Hi, my name is Eitan Kennefic.
Eitan.
I've been farming organically for the past 4 years, and
California?
Massachusetts.
It's illegal there. Just kidding. Go on.
Vegetables. I've been growing vegetables and working with dairy goats. And the issue of confinement animal feed operations has come up a lot in conversations. And I found it to be very confusing that kefos can be glatt kosher.
Yeah.
And shlita at that scale is kosher. So if you could just kind of talk about that.
In the agribusiness, and when it comes to animals, so the treatment of the animals is like beyond low standard. I mean, you can watch videos on this. It's radical. I mean, just go on YouTube and see what's going on. You'll never want another burger as long as you live. Well, maybe at least till Shabbos. But anyway, it's pretty nasty stuff. And the question is, how could it be kosher? And also, how can you slaughter, for the kosher slaughter, when you're slaughtering that amount of animals, how can that be kosher? So again, I'm just going to give the super short answer, and that is that it is, even though it's forbidden to be cruel to an animal in Judaism, and in fact, that's one of the few commandments that the Gentiles have. Gentiles only have 7 commandments, and one of them is cruelty to animals. You know, certainly we have it as Jews. But it turns out that slaughtering an animal that was mistreated, meaning you could put a cow in a headlock for like a year straight. If you slaughter it, it's still kosher. The slaughtering and the treatment of the animals are not, it doesn't affect its kosher status, as you know. And, but it may affect the conscience of people. I know many kosher eaters who are not eating kosher meat. Sorry, who are not eating meat from those kosher slaughters because of the treatment of the animals there. And they just conscientiously choose not to eat it. Because of that, they do eat free-range, more organically grown produce, animals, but they will not eat those animals. That's, I mean, that's the best I can do. And as far as slaughtering in quantity, again, in that case, there's heavy-duty supervision there, and they're doing a good job, you know. And if they blow it, so they blow it. And there are different tricks. There are halachic tricks that are within the realm of halacha. There are tricks to do just to make sure everything stays on the level of kosher. And but it's kosher. What can I say? It's kosher. Kosher. But again, someone has to deal with their own sentiments to see if that's something they want to be supporting or not.
The soul's made out of 5 parts, right?
Yeah.
So the first 2 parts, how can humans access it? Basically the Haya and the Yehida?
Can we access it?
Yes.
That's your question?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll go into some detail on this just so everyone knows what's going on here. So there are 5 aspects to the soul, 5 levels to the soul. The highest aspect is called the Yechida. The next is called the Chaya. The next is called the Neshama. The next is called the Ruach. And the last is called the Nefesh. Okay? These upper 2 are not accessible. Until death. Only at death are they accessible. And the other 3 are totally accessible. These are the accessibles. So the highest level one is called the Yechida. That's where all of us unite spiritually. It's like aspen trees in Colorado. You guys ever seen aspen trees, these beautiful trees in Aspen? Yeah. So The aspen trees, you could ski for like 20 minutes through a forest of aspen trees. They actually are all one organism. They come from one root. There's only one aspen tree. It just pops up out of all those different spots. And they're big, gorgeous trees, but they actually only have one root. That's the yechida. That's where all souls unite. And that's why the word like echad, yechid, okay, one. And we can't really get that aware. It's hard for us to be in touch with that in this world. Because I see you sitting there and I'm standing here, and it's not yechida, it's you there and I'm here. The next level is called the chaya. And the chaya is your highest self. It's the part of you that is like your highest level potential in every situation. It's your highest aspiration. You're kind of judged by it. When you pass away, that's what's judging you. More than God, you're being judged by what you could have been and could have done in any situation. Like what would have been the highest level way of approaching something. What I meant by inaccessible is that you can't necessarily hear its voice so well. You can't necessarily hear it, meaning you don't hear it. The neshama you hear. Okay? So the neshama, ruach, and nefesh the neshama is your connection to spirituality. It's your desire for spirituality, your desire for wisdom, your desire for anything higher, like higher level stuff. The ruach it means wind or spirit. It's the part of you that gets enthusiastic, gets inspired. And you'll see that the nefesh is where it interfaces with your body. The nefesh is the interface between the soul and the body. And you'll see, you'll get like totally inspired and excited about something that's purely physical. Could be really excited about a beer, really excited about a sport, or really excited about a financial deal. There could be all kinds of things that excite you and get you all inspired. So that which is getting inspired is your ruach. Now your ruach can either go towards the physical or it can go towards the spiritual. And if you ignore the physical too much, so the spiritual will chime in and say, what are you doing? Make you feel all guilty about it or something. So that's the neshama is your spiritual drive, and the nefesh goes towards more physical drive. But the one thing I want you guys to get, which is important, is that each of these have whole realms, meaning the yechid is really one realm, but the chaya has its realms, and the neshama has its realms. It's got whole realms. Neshama, for example, your highest use of the neshama would be prophecy. Like if you were totally using like the top level of your neshama, you'd be totally outside space and time, and you'd be a prophet. There are lower level uses of neshama where you'd be like, I don't know, we'll put it here, like this would be prophecy. That would be like, down here would be like totally no neshama. It'd be like Hitler or something, like the opposite of neshama. And this would be the highest level, would be like prophecy. Over here would be like divine inspiration, which in Hebrew is called Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. Here is the level of, this is called enlightenment. Enlightenment. This is where like Buddhists are trying to reach, enlightenment. It's funny, it's only halfway up in Judaism. But this is like, the word Buddha means enlightened. Okay? It's where you are so into your neshama that you've lost all selfish attachments. There's no, I am the river. Okay? You are me, I am you. Okay? And I've just lost a sense of self or selfishness. And I get like I can be that giver.
Being that you place prophecy at the top of the line can be, knowing that prophecy is no longer accessible, can you still attain that level of access to the neshama, even though it wouldn't result in prophecy?
No, you can't. It's not accessible right now. To get to prophecy is not accessible. And even divine inspiration's barely accessible right now. Like, I mean, probably the last people who lived with someone who like actually walked around with divine inspiration all the time was probably Rashi. I don't know. He lived 1,000 years ago. And prophets, we haven't had a prophet in 2,500 years. Biggest Hasidic greats, like the Rabbi Elimelech from Luzhinsk in the Ukraine, the Ukraine was like the most spiritual place of Europe. And he left town and dressed like a beggar for 2 years, living hundreds of miles from his house, just to work on himself, to be a beggar. One of the top rabbis of like Jewish history, lived as a completely anonymous beggar. And when he came back to his hometown after 2 years, he overheard some women saying, did you hear that the boy, one of the children of the town, did you hear that Elazar is sick? And the other woman said, really? And this rabbi happened to have a son named Elazar. And so he's walking and he's thinking, I hope it's not my Elazar. At which point he stopped and said, after 2 years of self-imposed exile, I still care more about whether it's my Elazar than someone else's Elazar. And he turned around and went right back out for another year of self-imposed exile to work only on loving every kid as if it were his own. These are rabbis who would be considered like really high-level people, but you see, they're not even there. And he was striving to get to enlightenment to where he could just totally not have a selfish part of his being. You get that? So it's unique.
I have a follow-up question to sort of this hierarchy of the soul. What is the Kabbalistic view of the afterlife after you die? I'm not that familiar with it, but like resurrection maybe, or reincarnation, and those two rivers where you know your soul kind of gets ashamed because your chaya is much better than. So I think they say you come to the afterlife and there's two rivers. One shows your perfect life, how you could have lived, and one shows how you did live.
Yeah. And
your soul is embarrassed. Is that what rabbis call Gehenna, or is that something else?
that is what is called Gehenna. So we can talk about that in a minute. I just wanted to finish this, is just to go down to the bottom. What is the bottom of the barrel? What is the bottom of the barrel of a neshama that's being ignored? Because you can totally ignore it. I mean, think about the Gold's Gym guy. He's like totally ignoring it. He's spending hours in the gym a day, and then he jumps into his, into his Audi, and he jumps into his Audi, and he's just living that world. That's his world. He spends his Sundays like. And so, that's his life. So when you ignore the neshama, and the only gut's inspired by the nefesh, so what happens to the neshama? Does it disappear totally? And the answer is no. The lowest level of the neshama is called conscience. And if you don't listen to the conscience, what's it called? Guilt. Have you ever thought about this? Conscience and guilt are purely spiritual. Right? If a lion is about to jump onto a deer, it doesn't stop midway and say this is wrong. Or let's say it just does it anyway, and eats it. There's not a lion psychologist comes to all the cubs are like, I feel dirty. You are dirty, covered in blood. You understand that this is purely spiritual stuff for people who ignore their soul. For people who ignore the neshama, which we often interchange with soul in Judaism. For people who ignore the neshama, this is it. It's just like the beepers on the back of your car, that tell you to stop, beep, 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 beep. It's a voice inside that says, don't go there. But meanwhile, there's billions, if not trillions, of advertisements saying, just do it. And then eventually, when you can't distract the guilt, eventually you start to numb the guilt. But how big do you think the alcohol industry is? Yeah? Or how big do you think, I don't know where Colorado's at this point with the no longer medical marijuana program, And how big is that industry? When you can no longer numb it, You know, or how about pharmacology? You know, pharmacology. You know, you just do whatever you want, just do it. If you're feeling bad about it, well, we got a little something you could take. You know, you'll be feeling just fine. Yeah, it's wild, wild. So anyway, it's just to realize, I just want to make that point, is that your neshama never goes away entirely. It still sticks with you. But a shame, what a shame, to use your fiber optic link to heaven, meaning your fiber optic link to spirituality, to reality, ultimately. To have that be relegated to conscience and guilt, that's silly. This is your link out of town, man. This is your antenna for transcendence. And most people you meet are just dealing with conscience and guilt all the time. What a shame. What a waste. It's like driving a Lamborghini like 30 miles per hour. It's a waste. And the neshama is just waiting. You can use your neshama. You guys have no idea where your neshama will take you if you just pay attention to it. Like you were saying, if you just listen to it and honor it, it'll take you way beyond this real quick. And it will show you things like you just can't believe. And not to mention, most importantly, is joy. Neshama brings joy. Prove it to you right now. You guys know when you get those little micro tests throughout the day, you know, do you throw away the cup or do you leave it out? Do you go to the class? Do you hang out in the square? You know, those little micro things. Should I call the person I'm supposed to call or should I just blow it off? You know those little micro tests you get throughout the day? You know when you pass it, you know, you pass one of those tests, how do you feel? Great. You feel great. You feel great. Whenever you win a test and you do the right thing, you always feel great. Now, for many of us, we have to sabotage that great feeling. Why? Because human beings don't know how to deal with feelings of holiness and goodness. So yeah, you feel great, but you got to sabotage it right after. You'll see even after this class, you might even have feelings towards like, hey, let's go to town. Why? Because you don't recognize yourselves as holy. What do I mean by that? You probably think you don't recognize yourself as holy. Not what I meant. What I mean is, when you look yourself in the mirror and you see yourself there, you're just like, I don't recognize you. I need the familiar. Human beings are addicted to familiar. We're addicted to familiar, so what happens is you're getting like pumped up with holiness. Look where we are right now. And we're getting Torah like every day, these like big downloads of Torah. And so it's automatically having its effect. But the problem is you look in the mirror like, who is that? It's unfamiliar to me. I need to have more garbage. I need garbage in my system. Give me garbage so I can feel something familiar to me. So it's a little weird, the whole thing. It's a little weird, but the point that I wanted to bring down just now, or bring up, is that when you listen to the neshama, you have joy. Remember, you have 5 levels. Yechida, Chaya, Neshama, Nefesh, Ruach, Nefesh. Now, each of those have gradations. We only explain the Neshama. The Nefesh also has gradations. And the bottom gradation of the Nefesh is the tip of my pinky and let's say the fingernail, which will segue into your question. That'll be the fingernail. Okay? And now what's happening is there's a cutoff here. It's right here. And the bottom of the Nefesh interfaces with the brain. That's what gives you, right now, you're listening to me, right? But your point of reference does not show up physically. They've mapped the whole brain. They cannot find you. You don't exist. Meaning you don't exist physically. That's your nefesh. Who you're listening to me now with right now is your nefesh. They can't, all the brain science, they cannot find you. They can't find your point of reference. Now that point of reference is your nefesh. It's the very bottom of the nefesh. The fingernail is all the stuff that glommed onto it through making stupid moves. Because every stupid move we make has its residue. There's a residue of stupid moves. Okay? And what's happening is I'm walking around with this like gigantic soul. And I've got this teeny little part that's 0.01% of who I am. And that's my point of reference called the nefesh, right? That's the part of me that's like, oh, here I am in Jerusalem. Yeah? But 99.9% of me is the spiritual that's above it. Can you think of a greater identity crisis than the fact that we've been walking around thinking that the 0.01% of me is me? That's a crazy identity crisis. It's crazy. It would be like one molecule of the entire Atlantic Ocean, one molecule in the middle of the bed of the Atlantic Ocean has declared independence from the ocean. I have nothing to do with this ocean. Yeah. That's the way we walk around. And all the marketing and the Greek world and our whole war over Hanukkah and the Greeks and everything was our fight with them of saying like, no, I'm giant. And the Greeks said, we can't govern individuals who think they're giants. How do you govern individuals like that? They're ungovernable. You know, it reminds me of Golda Meir when she said to the President of the United States like 50 years ago, you know, he said to her, you know what it's like to be the president of 300 million people? And she says, you know what it's like to be the prime minister of 6 million prime ministers? You're a giant. Each one of us is giant. And this, by the way, I'm just going to bring up, it's a separate subject, but this is God's plan, is that you're giant. I mean, you actually happen to also be giant, but this is God's plan, is that God created every single human being, Jew and Gentile, black man, white, B'Tselem Elohim, with the image of God inside of him or her. So every person is giant. But you can't govern people who think that. So what governments have done throughout the world is they push them down and make them small. And so governments throughout the world have pushed down leaders of whole communities. Every country was led by medicine men, by the men who understood the giantness of every individual. Until, of course, the machine comes in. Welcome to the machine. And wipes out whatever Amazon jungle civilization that was, and especially the medicine man, who teaches everyone how big they are. And we are that exact representation. The only difference is God chose us at Sinai to be this nation that's going to like cross the finish line. Like, at the end of history, we're going to cross through the tape of the finish line. We are the model nation of the world to tell everyone that every individual is giant. And you'll notice when those same shamanistic substances hit America in the late 1960s, it was all legal. What did anyone know from it? And as soon as they discovered that it makes an individual giant, and you realize you can't govern people like that, it immediately got classified as legal. Sorry, as illegal. These are the guys who founded these companies. And they're like, oh, you want to make that illegal? That's cool, you know. We'll just work in high tech for a while. You know, so they go into high tech, and they created what's called the personal computer, which again, the government didn't know better. It was like, oh, that looks innocent enough. Help yourselves. I remember my first computer with the floppy disks and stuff. We're like, we didn't think anything of it. But slowly but surely, it was whittling its way down to the power of an individual to make gigantic changes in the world with just one little press of a button. Whole governments, despots, dictators, torn down with social networking. The power of the individual is back. And it was the same people they put down in the 60s created it. It's all part of the process that I've been teaching you guys for a couple weeks now of God shamanizing creation. There's a big part of it, and the biggest part has to do with digital, but we're not going to go there right now. Now, as far as the afterlife is concerned, let's look at it like this. This circle represents, let's say this circle is the soul, yeah? And it's in the world of souls, this giant, beautiful world of souls. Yeah, it's up there in that world of souls. And the world of souls is obviously outside space and time. The soul is existing in a timeless form. And that soul has been chosen. Let's give it a little face here. Okay? That soul has been chosen to come down to earth. Now, the soul has no interest in that because the soul is always looking, in this direction over here. I don't know how to make eyes look, but let's just say it's looking over here. Yeah, at this incredible light source, like a moth to a light bulb, literally just like all the time, just like blown away by this incredible light. But it's not just light. There's a lot more there. It's all information, really. It's just worlds of information in the most. I can't even describe what we're talking about here, but just imagine this room you're in. Like you're in this room and you can experience whatever's in this room right now, right? But this room's made of a lot more than what meets the eye. If you know any physics and quantum physics, this room's made of a lot. It's also got a lot of people in it. And each person in this room's a world in himself or herself with their whole history and their whole makeup and everything like that. Imagine, and this is what the near-death experience people call it, the people who die and get brought back to life, they call them thought balls. Imagine if you got a thought ball just for this room, nothing beyond the room, but just this room, including everyone in it, and you got a thought ball of everything it contains. And just like you just got a thought ball, it just came in, it was just like, boom. And in no time, because there's no time there, you just got the full picture of this room. Everything, on the quantum level, all the way to this speed of vibration that we're in, including everyone's lives that are in this room, everything going on with them, and you just be like that, okay? That's what's there. No one wants to leave there. No one's interested in coming down here. Who's there? However, God's very persuasive. And he tells you it's better for you because you think you're getting thought balls. You have not seen the thought balls that are going to come when you get back here. Why? Because I've got a place for you that's that's way closer to me. But the only way to get closer to me is by inhabiting a body. You got to first be in a body, like Pac-Man, where you collect all those dots. You got to first collect all those dots. Okay, you got to run away from the lunch bags, and because you're getting chased around by the dark side. But you got to collect the dots. Now, of course, you still disagree, and you're like, no, because it's too big a liability. I mean, you just cut someone off in traffic. He misses a light and winds up losing his job. And you didn't even notice. I mean, you used your blinkers. He was in your blind spot. And you didn't hit him, but he missed the light. And he lost his job. And that's with being a good person. That's without making stupid moves. So you're like, I'm not going down there because it's just too much liability. At which point God's like, you don't understand. It is the perfect family. It's the perfect sibling order. You've been traveling with the same family for like 3 millennia. And it's finally, everything's like back in place. It's going to be the exact birth order that you need to be. Your sibling was your mom in your last life. And you're going to totally work it out together. And you got to go down. Anyway, so very reluctantly, you're just like, fine, I'll go. Everyone has to agree. So you go. I could tell you an amazing story. It's not for here. It's a long story. But I can tell you an amazing story of one of the souls of a great person who refused to go. And what happened to him is an amazing odyssey of a Hasidic story. Anyway, so the answer is you're going. So you come down and you pop out, whoop, and there you are, and it's like, wah, wah, wah. And then you cruise around this earth for this, through this corridor. Now, smart people remember it's a corridor. And you're in Pac-Man, and your job is to collect as many dots as possible. What are those? Mitzvahs. Okay, just do nice things for people. Thank parking attendants. If you're a man, try to wear black leather boxes. Okay, and etc. But just like grab the mitzvahs as much as you can. Eat the black leather little box. Eat the little dots as you go. Eat the black leather boxes, and just eat them, eat them, eat them, eat them, eat them, and be careful of the dark side. That's the little lunch bags chasing after you, and basically that's your job. Okay, And what do I want to say about it? Oh, is that there are people who don't realize they have a soul at all, and they try to set up camp here in the corridor. If I can give you an analogy of that, that'd be like, imagine like a lady shows up in Chicago, and she gets out of the plane, and she goes to she's walking through the jetway towards the terminal, and she sees a little alcove. She puts out a bedroll and just like lays down there and you know, sets up camp. So eventually they bring airport security, and they're like, excuse me, lady, what are you doing here? She's like, well, I've come to Chicago for 3 days. And they're like, we'll keep going, you know. And she's like, no, this is Chicago, right? And he's like, it is Chicago. And she's like, okay, this will be my spot. 3 days in Chicago. And he's like, lady, you can't sleep here in the jetway. And she's like, show me somewhere in the bylaws of this airport you cannot sleep in a jetway. This is where I'm sleeping. That's the way certain people are. There are so many people in this world who have tried to make this their home. And it's not the kind of thing you want to do. Especially because no time passes. Let's say this is death over here. I don't know how to make death. We'll just make another circle to come out. Yeah? This is death. Okay? So you don't want to make the corridor to your destination the place you're staying. That's one. And two is, don't forget, no time passes from birth to death. From the time you're born till the time you die, no time will have passed. Not even any time. Imagine, I'll give you an example. Imagine the person you're next to. You happen to have a neighbor there, okay? And you've been next to each other for the last like 400 years. Earth years. There's no time there. You've been together for 400 years, and it turns out you forgot to collect dots. You collected nothing, which means you're going right back where you were, the same exact spot, which is still amazing. I mean, the thought balls are cool there. Do you think this guy's going to say, where have you been for the last 80 years? Is he going to say, where have you been? No, no time passed. Time's a created thing. This whole entire experience you're having in your life, no time is passing. This is just, you're inside the Truman Show right now. You're inside this giant bubble called congealed consciousness of God. This is God's congealed consciousness. And now your job is to cruise around in here and do good things. Bring love, bring light, lots of mitzvahs, stuff like that. Avoid the negative stuff, the lunch bags, and just do goodness in your life. No time's going to have passed. Don't get fooled. Even time is like camping out in the jetway. Thinking of time the way we do it's a mistake. And you're not old and you're not young. You're just on this journey in a physical realm, within a spiritual realm, and you're being given an offer that you can't refuse of getting really close forever and ever.
Not to take your beliefs or everyone's beliefs, but it sounds like a lot of cute stories to make us maybe not fear death or miss our family. Where's some sort of evidence? Does the Torah tell us this is exactly what happened? And where in the Torah does it tell us that?
Wow, that's an amazing question. That's a great question. So I'll tell you the source of all this. The source of all this, and we're only kind of halfway there, but the source of all this is Kabbalah. Okay, it's from the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah, so what, right? You know, I'll go to some other mysticism and it'll tell me something else. Real mysticism, by the way, will tell you very similar stuff about this world. Because you'll notice that the Kabbalists, when they discuss death, and the shamans, no matter what continent you go to, whether it's Australia all the way to South America to Native America, the Native Americans, the shamans, no matter where you go, say the exact same thing. So there's a universal knowledge here. So that's one thing that, for me, means a lot. That means a lot. If the shamans and the Kabbalists are talking about the same exact stuff when it comes to death, and the shamans who obviously have this access to it, and the Kabbalists who have our Kabbalistic tradition, so that means a lot. There's another thing that means a lot, is that the sages are the same sages that taught you what is a peretz tefillin, or what's a peretz tzitzis, or how to keep Shabbos, or any of the things that we trust them for, or even who's a Jew. How do you know you're Jewish? It's only the sages. Torah doesn't say. You know, the sages tell us. I mean, the Torah hints at who's a Jew, but we're trusting the sages for everything. And that you even exist as a Jew today is only because you had a great-great-grandma who went to mikvah, because she would never cohabitate with your great-great-great-grandfather unless she had been to mikvah. Well, what's a mikvah? Well, you have to ask the rabbis. It's back to the sages. Well, our sages are the same exact sages that are in the Kabbalah. Meaning when you open a Mishnah to see how to make a mikvah, and then you open a Zohar, it's the same dudes. It's one-stop shop. It's not like today where you have like halachic authorities and then these Kabbalist types who tell you got to like change your name or something. Okay? It's not like that. In those days, it was the same guy you're trusting for how to do basic Judaism, all the way to advanced, halachic, observance, are the same exact ones that taught us all this Kabbalistic stuff. And where it shows up in Torah isn't that relevant either, because the Torah is like very need-to-know basis. And if you look, for example, the desert, it's interesting to know about the Jews in the desert. They were there 40 years. How much of it was recorded in the Torah? Parts of 2 years. Can someone tell me something about Abraham's life besides what the Torah says? I mean, we have rabbinic traditions. We have our sages have rabbinic traditions, oral tradition from Sinai about Abraham. But the Torah is missing a lot of that stuff because it's all hyperlinks. See, Kabbalists, when we read a story about Abraham, we're reading a story about Abraham. When the Kabbalists read it, they're reading a string of information. And so, yes, it's embedded in there. It's all embedded in Torah. And a Kabbalist, maybe if you stay with me and study a few years, could show you exactly where all this is. I couldn't, I'm not on that level, but they could show you where all this is just by scanning certain letters and certain sentences. And he would show you, but it would take a high level of understanding to get there, to see where it is.
Name's Gavriel Chalfin-Piney. So this is a question about kind of going back a little bit to like vocations and like what you're doing kind of in this corridor. I'm just using a few examples of like rabbis, artists, soldiers, athletes, spiritual leaders. It's like and to use like a personal anecdote, it's like for me, I feel split. Like I could be a doctor, I could be an artist, could be a rabbi. And it's like, I'm not sure how much of this is going to make sense, but looking at it in terms of like, what's a liability? What is the most spiritual? Where the mitzvah is like lying, and like it's also being young, but like which paths do you go towards?
Given this?
Given anything.
There's a lot of people who choose to just live their lives in Torah.
Yeah. And I think this was also just harping on what you've been saying and some others of like Buddhist monks are like, okay, forget this world, I'm going to go live on a mountain for the rest of my life. As opposed to Judaism where it seems more of like, no, your mountaintop is like right here.
There are those who choose to live their lives fully engaged only in Torah. And that's a rare opportunity because not so many people are going to fund that. Who's going to fund you learning Torah for the rest of your life? So you really got to choose an occupation. But I highly suggest spending a certain period of time getting literate. You should be literate in the Torah world, and and for each person that's going to be a different amount of time, but all of us should be literate. I think that's basics. So taking time off to be literate, that's my first suggestion. As far as vocation, I don't think vocation matters that much as long as it's really in your zone. And it's a whole other subject of like really making sure you're in your zone. For example, there's intellectual people whose zone will be in ideas. There are more interpersonal people who would make great proprietors of a restaurant, and that's going to be their zone. Then there's other more artistic types. They're more instinctual types, and their zone might be dance or art or music or something like that. So I'm more interested in someone being in their zone. I believe God created your zone, and that you're supposed to honor that and spend your time doing that. But when it comes to dealing with the corridor aspect, is to use the zone that you want to work in as a vocation, is to use that zone for Hashem. You're going to be interacting with people no matter what profession you do. Interact with goodness and kindness. See the other person as yourself. If you wind up in a business situation where you could make out with more as long as you keep your mouth shut, open your mouth and say, I want this to be equitable for both of us. I want a win-win here. I don't want to rip anybody off. I don't want extra residue on me. If you're just purely in finance, which means, let's say you're pulling in, let's say you're after taxes, you're clearing, say $5 million a year after, like really getting wealthy. You're clearing $5 million a year. Well, that means you automatically owe 10%, which is $500,000. You're building institutions now for the goodness of humanity, and you're starting yeshivas now, for $500,000, and so it's just go to work for it, no matter what you do, you're still buying the kosher food, which means the butcher is now putting his kids through Torah school off your occupation, and now they're taking it's just, and now those kids are growing up in Torah all off your having just bought meat for Shabbos. So you can totally spiritualize your life. You just got to look at it spiritually. I mean, a doctor just could be spaced out and just think he's healing bodies all day, or a doctor could be doing the greatest kindness and doing the greatest mitzvah.
My name is Yehuda Gutkin. I want to know why, or maybe give a reason why there's only how many in the shop. It's only how many souls are there? There were and we have to reuse them, or why didn't we have how many billions and billions of souls, new souls, fresh souls?
Excellent. So the question is, why are we all recycled reincarnations of the 600,000 root souls of Sinai? That's one question.
I was informed once that it's possible to get in touch with your Yetzer Hara, literally. And I wanted to know how you do that and the benefits of what you could do with it.
I'm trying to get out of touch with my Yetzer Hara, literally. I think I hear the question. So I don't know what that means exactly. I mean, I'm mostly in touch with my Yetzer Hara all the time. I think we all are. The Yetzer Hara means the evil inclination, meaning the party that doesn't want to put the cup in the garbage, the party that doesn't want to treat someone well, the part of you that wants to, do the wrong things. So you simply harness it and do the kosher thing using that same Yetzer Hara, if you can. Meaning you can actually harness it. Every morning we have a prayer that God let us harness the Yetzer Hara to do good.
Aharon Dornbush, and my question is, what is perfection in the physical realm? God is perfect,
yeah.
And so when we strive for perfection, I guess in my own mind, I see things like trees. They're just being themselves as being almost perfect. But then we had this argument that they're always striving to grow and to. So I'm just wondering if there's ever a state of perfection in just simply being.
In a deep way that I think will touch all of us is that and it touches the tree growing too, and the perfection is that at all times what is perfect, and yet at all times there's room for improvement. Meaning, just quickly, let's take your father for example, and for the girls, let's take your mother. Okay, for the guys, your father, and girls, your mother. They could they be more perfect? Yeah, they could. But are they exactly as they are right now? All they are and all they're not? Yeah. And in that state right there, if you would just recognize that, you would sense their beauty and their love for you, and you totally connect, accepting them for all they are and all they're not. There's a lot of imperfection, but in that freeze frame of life, if you just freeze frame it, there's a perfection there. And I even argue that this is the key to growth for ourselves too, because if you, I think every one of us is a work in progress, and I don't think any of us have made it. But if you freeze frame yourself right now, there's a sense of acceptance that gives you a launching pad for your next level of growth. There's a lot of people who are so into growth but they never experience God now. God's where you're at now. This is where God interfaces with you now and loves you now and is creating you now. Do you have to grow? Yes, you must grow. You must move to the next station in your growth. But here you are now. Don't miss where God and you interface. And that's why I meet some people who get that God's interfacing with them now, but they're not really into growth. And then I'll meet another person who's like, Mr. Growth, you know. But he never gets that God's interfacing with him now. So one's walking with God and the other one's like postponed life to some other station he's going to hit. So the answer is perfection's right now, and the imperfection's also there, and we're going to grow to the next level. Okay, shalom everyone.